Hello students, welcome to the station. Today we will discuss animal physiology, paper 4, BSc Zoology. In this chapter we will discuss respiration and its functions. Mainly, respiration main function to provide oxygen to the tissues and remove carbon dioxide. The four major functions of respiration we will discuss now. Number one, pulmonary ventilation, which means the inflow and outflow of air between the atmosphere and the lung alveoli. This is the main objective of the respiratory system. Second one is diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the alveoli and the blood. Transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood and body fluids to and form the body's tissue cells and regulation of ventilation and other facets of respiration. These are the four main functions of the respiration. Mechanism of pulmonary ventilation. Muscles that cause lung expansion and contraction. The lungs can be expanded and contracted in two ways: by downward and upward movement of the diaphragm to lengthen or shorten the chest cavity, and by elevation and depression of the ribs to increase and decrease the anterior posterior diameter of the chest cavity. Normal quiet breathing is accomplished almost entirely by the first method, that is the movement of the diaphragm. During inspiration, contraction of the diaphragm pulls the lower surfaces of the lungs downward. Then, during expiration, the diaphragm simply relaxes and the elastic recoil of the lungs, chest wall, and abdominal structures compresses the lung and expels the air. During heavy breathing, however, the elastic forces are not powerful enough to cause the necessary rapid expiration. So, extra force is achieved mainly by contraction of the abdominal muscles, which pushes the abdominal contents upward against the bottom of the diaphragm, thereby compressing the lungs. The second method of expanding the lungs is to raise the rib cage. This expands the lungs because in the natural resting position, the ribs slant downward when the rib cage is elevated. However, the ribs project almost directly forward. So the sternum also moves forward away from the spine, making the anterior posterior thickness of the chest about 20% greater during maximum inspiration than during expiration. Therefore, all the muscles that elevate the chest cage are classified as muscles of inspiration, and those muscles that depress the chest cage are classified as muscles of expiration. The most important muscles that raise the rib cage are the external intercostals, but other the help the sternocleidomastoid muscles which lift upward on the sternum, anterior serrati which lift many of the ribs, and scaleni which lift the first two ribs. These are the muscle functions during respiration. The muscles that pull the rib cage downward during expiration are mainly the abdominal recti, which have the powerful effect of pulling downward of the lower ribs at the same time that they and other abdominal muscles also compress the abdominal contents upward against the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. This is the this diagram demonstrates the during expiration in this expiration diagram, the contraction and expansion of the thoracic cage during expiration and inspiration, demonstrating diaphragm contraction function of the intercostal muscles and elevation and depression of the rib cage. Here, inspiration, the elevated rib cage, see here. The arrow shows the movement. Diaphragmatic contraction, abdominal contracted muscles, internal intercostal relaxed state, external interior costal contraction state, increased diameter, increased vertical diameter. This is the diagram which shows the expiration and inspiration. The compliancy of the thoracic and the lung together, the entire pulmonary system, that is lung and thoracic cage, is measured while expanding the lungs of a total relaxed of paralyzed person. To do this, air is forced into the lungs a little at a time while recording lung pressure and volumes. To inflate this total pulmonary system, almost twice as much pressure as to inflate the same lungs after removal from the chest cage is necessary. Therefore, the compliancy of the combined lung thorax system is almost exactly one half, and of the lung alone 110 millimeters of volume per centimeter of water pressure for the combined system, compared with 200 ml per centimeter for the lungs alone. Furthermore, when the lungs are expanded to high volumes or compressed to low volumes, the limitations of the chest become extreme. When near these limits, the compliance of the combined lung thorax system can be less than one fifth that of the lung alone. The work of inspiration can be divided into three fractions. Number one, that required to expand the lungs against the lung and chest elastic forces called compliancy work of elastic work. That required to overcome the viscosity of the lung and chest wall structures called tissue resistance work, and that required to overcome airway resistance to movement of air into the lungs called airway resistance work. Energy required for respiration. During normal quiet respiration, only 3 to 5% of the total energy expended by the body is required for pulmonary ventilation. But during heavy exercise, the amount of energy required can increase as much as 50-fold, especially in the person has any degree of increased air resistance or decreased pulmonary compliancy. Therefore, one of the major limitations of the intensity of exercise that can be performed is the person's ability to provide enough muscle energy for the respiratory process alone. Pulmonary capacities. The inspiratory capacity equals the tidal volume plus the inspiratory reserve volume. This is the amount of air, 3500 milliliters. A person can breathe in beginning at the normal expiratory level and distending the lung to the maximum amount. The functional residual capacity equals the expiratory reserve volume plus the residual volume. This is the amount of air that remains in the lungs at the end of normal expiration, about 2300 milliliters. The vital capacity equals the inspiratory reserve volume plus the tidal volume plus the expiratory reserve volume. This is the maximum amount of air a person can expel from the lungs after first filling the lung to their maximum extent and then expiring to the maximum extent about 4,600 milliliters. The total lung capacity is the maximum volume to which the lung can be expanded with the greatest possibility effort, that is 5,800 milliliters. It is equal to the vital capacity plus the residual volume. All pulmonary volumes and capacities are about 20 to 25% less in women when compared to the men, and they are greater in larger and athletic people than in small and asthenic people. This is the some of the important points regarding pulmonary